Pratt. I'm a sophomore from Whitehall Junior Senior High School, and I am a part of the New York State SADD SLC. And today I'm going to be interviewing Marianne, and if Marianne wants to introduce herself.
Okay, thank you, Louie. So my name is Marianne Angelillo, and I live in Skaneateles, New York, which is central New York. And we moved here about 25 years ago with our 4 children to begin a wonderful life of winter wonderland.
Okay, so first off, how did you get started as a speaker?
So very, very interesting journey I have had along with my family. But 17 years ago, my 17-year-old son was a junior in high school, and he was killed Father's Day morning in the wee hours of the morning in a tragic high-speed car crash. He was a passenger. And it was interesting how I had never intended this journey in my life. However, I felt that I needed to do something. The driver was drunk. All 3 of the students in the car were under the influence. They had been at a party in the woods, and they made a very reckless choice to drive home together. I remember calling into a radio station a couple weeks later as they were discussing underage drinking and driving and careless decisions. And as a mother, I called into the radio station and I said, "My name is Marianne Angelillo. I just lost my son in a horrific drunk driving crash. And I invite any parent or teenager in our community to come into my home and see what it's like to endure this type of suffering." And from then on, I started getting phone calls. "Would you like to come share your story at our high school?" So that was 17 years ago. And I've been speaking and sharing our family journey ever since.
I'm so sorry about your son. What are you doing nowadays? You're obviously continuing to speak, but do you have maybe some hobbies you've been doing?
Well, it's an interesting time in COVID. I miss my work terribly. I love working with students. A good day for me is when I have a high school I'm arriving to, and you're surrounded by kids and teachers and wonderful staff that welcome you. And I get to shout from the rooftops how much I miss and love my son. And I have a picture of him here so you can see. But I actually took this picture myself at his junior prom and helped him pick his tux outfit out. And in a million years, I never thought that that would be the last dressed up formal picture I would ever take of him. But it sits on my dresser in my bedroom. COVID has separated us from public gathering and from assembly, and it's been very hard. My last assembly was in March with 1,000 students up in the North Country near Sackett's Harbor. I had 1,000 students gathering in March, and I left the school that afternoon and they closed New York State down the next morning. And the rest of my schedule, along with the other speakers, was canceled for the year. You know, we had spent all year working on booking these schools, so it was quite disappointing. But I have taken my message. I know you have a lot of other questions to ask me, but I ended up publishing a book called Sharing My Stones. And the main message in the book is that sometimes when you are hit with such intense sorrow and disappointment, you have a choice. You can try to bury it and stuff it down and pretend it doesn't exist, or you can find a fellow friend, stranger, neighbor, coach, teacher, counselor, and share a stone out of your heavy bag of sorrow and give them a stone and share your story with them. And what happens is you get two gifts. You get the gift of compassion from other people, which is extremely healing. And you also get the gift of your load being lighter because you have taken a stone out of your heavy bag. That concept of healing is something I live my life by. And I actually do volunteer work in a jail in Cuyahoga County, New York. And that's what we do in our little small groups. We share stones.
Is it hard telling your story over and over again?
I will answer with a quick no. It is not hard. It is extremely rewarding. And every time I share my story, I take a stone out of that bag and multiple stones and hand them to students. And it's never hard to share it.
How big of an issue would you say is impaired driving for teenagers?
Oh, could you repeat that?
How big of an issue would you say is impaired driving for teenagers?
Impaired driving. You know, it's interesting. I thought, and I haven't looked at statistics much this year, but I thought that with all the fewer cars on the road, that driving would be less risky. And I just read an article, I'm sure you read it too, Lauren, that high-speed car crashes are astronomically increasing during COVID. People are, you know, maybe it's the sense of being cooped up and or they're taking out all their frustration in a car. But in the country, they're tracking these records of increased, you know, drunk driving, impaired driving, and high-speed crashes, and fatalities are up considering the number of traffic is down. So I think the message is still and always probably, unfortunately, will be very, very relevant.
Who has been your favorite audience to speak to, whether it's like a certain school, a state, place to visit?
Okay, so I have an interesting answer. My favorite audience right off the bat is parent and student sitting next to each other. That's my favorite audience. Not just a high school audience, not just parents, but parent sitting with their student. And I have only done it fewer times than most, because most of my presentations are high school students without their parents. But anytime I get an opportunity to go to a school where it's mandatory evening presentation, you don't get your parking permit until you bring your parent to the presentation, and then you get your parking permit. That to me is the most powerful audience, because I believe this is teamwork. To make our roadways safer, it is teamwork between, and underage drinking is teamwork between student and parent. So it's nice for them to feel the emotion together. And then it opens up conversation when they get home.
What makes you keep doing this?
It's multiple reasons. I think one is I have a gift to do it. So I believe in using your gifts. I'm never nervous. I'm never afraid. And I never don't want to do it. So something's telling me that I'm on the right purposeful path for my life. The second thing is it connects me to my son. To this day, I have 3 living children, 1 in heaven. And I think about each one of them equally, because Matt's very much a part of my life. And then what really keeps me going is when I get small little signs that my message is working.
And you mentioned that you had written a book called Sharing My Stones. Can you tell me what it's like to be a published writer and like that lifestyle?
So being a writer, I love to write. and I never, ever dreamed that I would ever be an author of a book. I've learned one thing, it's not easy to get your book out there in the world. And I will say I donate one to every high school I speak at. And Syracuse University uses it as curriculum every semester for a health class. So next week, 50 SU students will read my book. They will write me an essay on the 3 top takeaways. And then I go to the classroom and the professor and I double team the discussion about my book. And it is a really rewarding day for me, but there are 2 things that are not easy about my book. One is the topic is difficult for most people. They don't want to pick up a book on death of a child. So most students will write me and say, I did not want to read this book, but I am so glad I did. And they love the book. And that's why we've been doing this for 7 years. So for 14 semesters, I at least send 50 SU students the knowledge of grief, loss, devastation, recovery, underage drinking, prevention, and love of family.
What is your biggest challenge in doing your work?
Right now, COVID. Right now, it never was like a horrible challenge for me, but I am not the type of person to push myself on someone. It's interesting because my husband's a salesman, my daughter's a salesperson, my other son's a salesman. I am not a salesperson. And when anyone for 16 years would ask me to do something, I would say yes, but I would never call up a principal and say, hey, I'm a really good speaker. I think you should have me come. I can't do it. I'm not successful at it. So I have been unsuccessful. That's the hardest part of my job, is getting my audience to find out about me.
How do you think you make teens feel after your presentations?
Interesting. I think I make them very reflective, very introspective. I think I might loosen a few stones that have been lodged in their hearts, and they were hardened to certain concepts like suffering and death, and maybe drinking and driving, or underage drinking and partying. And I think I'm able to dislodge a few stones out of there. And perhaps they'll share them.
So now that everything has basically gone virtual, are you able to do virtual presentations?
I'm here. Yes, I would like to. I haven't been that successful in booking them yet. I'm hoping that this spring, if that's all we have to do, I'm fine with it. I mean, it's interesting, but I'm on Zoom a lot. I Zoom with my family, my sisters. I Zoom with my kids. This morning, I Zoomed on a Bible study. I'm fine. I feel very connected to you, Louie. So I'm fine with whatever, if that's what a school would like to do. I'm definitely available. I only make one prerequisite. I did a driver's ed class and they didn't make it mandatory to turn their video on, and I prefer to speak to faces.
And I know what you mean there. A lot of problems we do have because my high school actually got flooded on top of COVID. So we are probably out for the whole year. And so we're all virtual all day, every day.
Yeah,
And a
right.
lot of problems being faced are the cameras. And it's a hard thing to get through.
Yeah, so I would say I'd like to see your faces.
Yeah, I know what you mean there. Because when the teachers have a problem where, you can't see your face, you don't know if you're actually learning. You
Right.
don't have that response. And that's hard.
And plus with this kind of topic, it's very helpful to look at you and Lauren and see a reaction, or just you're connecting with another human being. So
You show a really nice video in your presentation of Matt and his friends and his family. What was it like to make that presentation?
oh, that video was very challenging. I was supposed to video his 2005 or 2004 football season. I had my camera all ready. I was going to do the booster video and the highlight video for the banquet. And I tried going to one football game and I could never go back. It was way too painful. So I had all these beautiful videos that I was constantly watching to remember him by. And one day I just kept videoing all the news on, and this is back, you couldn't like record it on the news. You had to hook up a VHS player and get a VHS tape and record the news. And then I took the tape and put it into my computer and I laid it out on a timeline. And every other clip is Matt's life and his death. It's powerful.
Who is your presentation geared at? Just high school students or even people that are older or younger?
I would say when I do the presentation, I really like the high school audience because Matt was 17 and he's in the tux, he's in the lacrosse uniform, he's getting his National Honor Society, like everything he was doing, studying for SATs is what all my audience is doing. And I've been able to bridge these 17 years like he could be in that audience with all those students. And it works, even though it's so many years later.
Are there follow-ups for after the program if teachers want to do more programming?
Absolutely. I'm always available. I think that it's very powerful for students to read my book. I think college works really well because the student has left the home and is not with their parents and they're on their own. And then they read my book and you know what they tell me they do? They call their mothers and fathers because they feel it so much. And they also reflect back on their experiences in high school. So because they're just one step from it, they're able to have a good, honest reflection on their life. And could this have happened to them? And are they fortunate they're alive? But it would be great after I do the assembly or before. It would be awesome for some of the students to pick up my book, but I know that's a big stretch for public schools. It's in the library though, because I donate one.
Tell us about some of the advocacy work you've done or other folks you've worked with in this position.
Very interesting. I think the jail has been probably the biggest life-changing experience I've had because you walk into a room and you're with mostly people who are really struggling and they have mostly lost everything because of drugs or alcohol. Often their crime was committed under the influence. And my slogan is when you drink, you don't think. So when someone says, I can't believe they did that, I go, of course I can believe it. If they're high on heroin or marijuana or drugs or alcohol, their wisdom is not with them. So one of the biggest messages I have is it's not just don't drink and drive. It's that you need to value your wisdom. You need to value your thinking, your ability to make good choices, your ability to say, no, I'm getting too close to the edge here. I shouldn't be jumping off this cliff, right? I shouldn't be getting into this car. I shouldn't let that friend drink and drive. And it's just critical, the wisdom piece. When you drink, you don't think, because all the rules and good character traits and everything you've learned your whole life goes out the window. So the advocacy work, working in a jail with a lot of people who have lost everything. And you know what they say to me? I didn't want to feel, so I was high every day from 13 to 20 because I didn't want to feel. And then I come in and I'm like, well, let's unpack your feelings. Let's learn to process how you feel. Give me a couple of your stones. Let me help carry some of your burdens. It's actually very Christian and very healing.
How does a school or even a group get your presentation for free?
Well, I am so fortunate. This is the most unbelievable part of my job, is that there are wonderful people who have funding to help our roadways be safer. And through Students Against Destructive Decisions and the Governor's Traffic Safety Committee, the state of New York, our highway departments, national safety out in, we used to work with them out in Chicago. It is amazing that they have funds and say, all I have to do is say to a high school, can I come? I'm free. It's amazing. So I would say, go on my website, go on my Facebook, go on Governor's Traffic Safety Committee has a speakers bureau, and also Lauren.
My dad is actually the superintendent of the highways where we live. So
Wow.
yep. So that's it always helps me when I'm promoting for SADD and stuff, especially about the like the roads and stuff, because you know, living with someone like that, he sees the struggles, he sees the problems out on the roadways all the time, and it hits close to home.
Yeah. Yeah, he must be really proud of you.
He is. He's normally out all. It's so hard to see him during the winter, especially with all the snow we get up here. It's definitely hard.
Mm-hmm.
So, if your programs are happening during COVID, have you had to socially distance them?
Yes, I did a few in October, and we actually, instead of where I would do one presentation for a whole school, we did 3 in a classroom, and everybody sat 6 feet apart. And then I did one Catholic school, which wasn't a huge school, but they all came in and sat 6 feet apart in the auditorium. So it's definitely possible. And we're hoping that in the spring, we're going to be healthier.
Well, thank you. You just answered all my questions. Did you have any questions you wanted to ask me?
Well, I'd love to come to your school or do a Zoom if you can.
That would be awesome. I thought
My
about that.
presentation. I'll put you on my list. Lauren, I appreciate this. This was helpful for me. First of all, it made me like comb my hair and get dressed. And I always am excited to talk about my Matt. One more picture. Here he is. And I'm going to try a little screen there. I did a little screenshot.
Well, we just love you guys. And, you know, I've seen all of your presentations 100 times and it gets me every time, but I think it's something we need to share with everybody. And we do have this grant money. We have so much of it available still. And I don't think folks are realizing that we can still operate.
Yeah. Like, do you think this is as powerful, just meeting online and seeing me just like this? I think so.
I think so too. And
I don't have a problem with it.
No, not at all. And I think it almost gives us the ability to do smaller group sessions and have like more of that, I'll call it intimate experience, getting to know you and getting to have those conversations with you that we wouldn't get in a larger, maybe bigger audience kind of vibe.
Right.
So I think it's got its uniqueness too. It's maybe not the way that we always want to do things, but
it's good.
Work.
And it's got to break up your days. I mean, wouldn't you rather just hear a personal story than be doing social studies or whatever else.
Yeah. And it gives us something to think about too. You know, you've said this very often, but Matt is stuck at 17 years old. Matt is always 17. And I know you've reiterated that to a lot of different audiences. And that's why I think his story and the way that you present it is everlasting, because he was a great kid. You know, he did everything right. He did everything he was supposed to. He had big dreams, and things still happen because we make decisions that are destructive. And it's great to keep pushing that message that every decision we make is important. And I think this is a kind of presentation that just drives that home, that brings that back to the forefront. So maybe it takes us out of our current thought process, you know.
And this is a big year for us because January 20th is his birthday, and he's going to be 34. And what that means is I'm starting my second, not seeing him longer than I've seen him.
Yeah.
Because I'm starting the 18th year without him.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, wow, it's going to be more than half his life is going to be gone, you know, like his lifespan. Now I'm starting to be the 18th year without him. So yeah, but next week on his birthday is my Syracuse University Zoom after they read my book. So I'm really excited. I have one bit of work next week, and then I have a driver's ed, Lauren, and I have one college in March, and I have plenty more to book. But that's all I've got so far.
And that's perfect. You know, I think it leaves a lot of space open, and I'm really hopeful too. And maybe this is the message that we can throw out to all of our folks out there as this interview goes live, that we're willing to do outdoor events and things as well. So when we get to that period in New York State, which is, you know, May here, when it's finally okay to sit outside again and not freeze, we're happy to do outdoor events and do socially distanced events in person that way, so we can kind of sort of get back to where we were, the new normal, but also make sure that we're being safe. You know, that's a huge priority for all of us as well.
So good. It's very clear in my mind that this is just a wonderful opportunity that I've been given. And I appreciate that, Lauren.
Oh God, we love having you too. You bring such a unique perspective, and that's the thing. We don't have to give you interview questions ahead of time because I know what your answers are going to be. It's the same every time because it's authentic. You don't have to make it up. It's there.
Yeah.
Love it.
Good.
Anyway. So thank you, Louie. Thank you, Marianne, for doing this for us. We're hopeful that this is going to have an exchange of ideas and allow people to see that this speakers program is still available, is still optionable for free, and is still something.
I know it would be, it is a good little intro to get people to, you know, Zoom isn't so bad, you know?
No, not at all. And I know that, you know, Louie, you can attest to this. You're on Zoom or Google Meet or whatever all day long, but this does break it up. It makes it a little bit different. It gives you a different thing to think about. And it really can be any number of classes too. You know, it doesn't just have to be health class or phys ed. We've been in a lot of different classes this year. We've been in a government class, a couple different options. And honestly, this really...
I've done a lot of like spring kickoff sports, you know, when they kick the spring sport off.
Yeah, this is great for coaches too. Fantastic for your athletes, and you know, if you want to get a couple of teams together to do an athletic competition or group together,
athletic group or whatever.
Particularly because Matt was an athlete, and we understand that our athletes are also taxing themselves in so many ways that drowsy driving becomes a problem too. So
absolutely. Right.
It's definitely something that's going to hit home for every teenager out there. It doesn't matter what classroom or, love it.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I love working today.
Good. I'm glad.
Okay. Take care. Nice to meet you, Louie.
Thanks, Louie.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you so much.
Bye.